Are your kids grappling with far more than the final score? Discover science-informed tools for real resilience and mindful toughness. Learn how to help young people win from within. This is Wrestling Through Adversity with Dr. Christine Silverstein and interviewer Valeria Koopman, host of the Fit for Joy podcast.
Aloha, everyone. This is another Freedom to Feel conversation, and my guest today is my dear Christine Silverstein, Dr. Christine Silverstein. She is a peak performance coach, founder of the Summit Center for Ideal Performance. She is a behavioral health registered nurse and clinical hypnosis expert as well. Dr. Christine is also a researcher, published historian, and bestseller author of the book Wrestling Through Adversity, Empowering Children, Teens, and Young Adults to Win in Life. So this is always the introduction that I give about you when we begin our conversations. This is a continuation of a series of podcast interviews. We have done 7 before. This is the 8th. Before, I know Christine, she always reminds me of our last discussion was about fear. That was a very we went kind of deep into that. I loved how, in a way, we kind of put this idea of fear into this flow of finding ways of dancing with it, as I usually say, kind of moving through fear and kind of getting ourselves back on track. So that was the last conversation, and then today we will be discussing chapter 8 of her book, ADHD, Where Did the Ants in My Pants Go? I kind of smile when I read that. That's a kind of cute, yeah. Talk to me about this title, specific title. Why did you choose to phrase it that way?
Well, it's commonly thought these days, not when I was experiencing challenges as a young child, that when you grow into adulthood, you carry this high energy forward into your life.
Right.
But not in a positive way. It's a way that you're having challenges with focus at work and driving or performing. So I say, yes, I had high energy as a child, and I learned how to transform that into achieving success. So right. Even though they were telling me as a child that that's what I had, ants in my pants, because there was no gym at my school, and the play yard at lunchtime was a parking lot, and we couldn't run, and there was an imaginary line, the boys on one side, the girls on the other, and so I would have to train myself. I would go home for lunch. I asked my mother's permission to go home for lunch. And I used to run home and time myself with my stopwatch and then eat my lunch really fast to get back to school on time before the bell rang, and then time myself to go faster on the way back. So I became the fastest runner on my block that way. And I also used my energy wisely to do many things. So that's what I'm saying. I had them then. They didn't go away. Matter of fact, I've used this energy my whole life to accomplish many things. Even today, talking about my book and talking about my experiences, I still work with that high energy. And I've learned to pace myself and to use it wisely from the inception of a new project to finish it out and to plan it out, map it out, so I can get the things done with my own natural energy. So the ants didn't go anyplace. They're still there. And I use them just like ants at a picnic who can lift many times their weight, right? Yeah. That's how I see it. Mm-hmm.
That is so sweet. I love the metaphor. And it's almost like there's in spirituality, we say transmutation of energy. We speak of alchemy, kind of always transforming something into another. But one of the things that, one of the concepts that I think I I love asking people. I'm very curious about it, and I'll ask you again. I'm sure I asked you before, but as of this moment, how do you define success? What is to be successful?
Well, success to me is, as a peak performance coach, and I've always been goal oriented, even as a child, is achieving your goals and setting the plan of action up of what can I do from point A to point B, and then when you achieve it on your own terms, and it doesn't mean that you have to always win the race or always win the competition or get 100% on every exam that you take, but it's your level of success, what you set for yourself. And there's always the ability to improve, because what's the biggest room in the world? Maybe I've asked you this question before, but the room for self-improvement.
Yes, yes.
So you can achieve success, maybe not 100%, but then you work towards it to make it better. So I think it's a perception, of course, that you have about success, because somebody else might say, "Oh, look at you! You only got 90 on that test. I got 100," and think that they're better than you are. So I'd say, "So good for you." I achieved my goal. I overshot. I thought I'd get 80 on the test, and I got 90. So it is. Success is personal.
Yes, you see, I love that that answer. Also, when you talk about success on your own terms, what does it translate into when we think about having success on our own terms? How would you describe that? What does it feel like to know that I have that success on my own terms?
Well, I think in this society, from a very early age, and I work with young clients, so I know this happens. So you come home one day and you have 100% on your spelling test, right? And your mom might put it up on the refrigerator or something. At least my mom did that when I was a child. And so now you're so proud, and you might have a gold star that the teacher put on it, in the classroom. And then maybe 2 weeks later, you didn't know there was an exam, or you were out sick and you didn't realize you had to study for another spelling test.
Right.
And you come home and you got 70, and if that happens too often, then you're not feeling good about yourself. That happens very often with young athletes when they're successful early on.
Yes.
I'm working with one right now where he won a lot of matches, and then you kind of give up on yourself, because you can't be perfect and you can't win every time, but you can learn from your mistakes as opportunities. And that is true even with accomplished athletes, like one I'm working with who was a champion martial artist as a young child and won all his competition, and also was not just winning, but he became a very good champion. And then he switched to wrestling later on, and he's having a challenging time. But he forgot that he was this champion, and then we talked about it, and he was just glowing, So that's a technique you can use. It's called mental recall. You go back in time to remember what happened, what were you doing, what were you thinking, and how did you experience it. And then the way I work with it is with a power word. So you connect a power word with that experience as you remember it. And then when you're in a situation, maybe now you're on the wrestling mat or you're in the classroom taking an exam, you can just say that power word and you're right back there in that space as the champion, just automatically. And it works really well. I've used that for many years. One time a wrestler had this habit of towards the end of a match of getting pinned. Of course, when you get pinned, you lose. Yes. So he came to me because he was a senior in high school, expecting to go to Cornell in the future, in the next year. And he had a knee injury. And also he had a younger brother who was very successful on the mat. And he wanted to go to the state championship. So he came to me. His mom was a psychiatric nurse, so she was aligned with psychological aspects, right? So he's telling me, oh, but look at me, Dr. Silverstein, I have this injury. Knee injuries are very common on the mat. And he's telling me, oh, I've never been to the state championship. I really want to go before I go to college.
Right.
Oh, but poor me. So anyway, we worked with this, for that semester. And I taught him all the skills. But the one that was most powerful was this mental recall. When he won a match in the past, and he was so excited about it, and he had his power word. So the next week, he goes out to this championship. He had to win it to qualify, and his mom knew about this power word and the exercise. I explained it to her. So I got this visual from another wrestler's mom who called me up, and she said she wanted her son to learn this technique. So from her perspective, she saw the mom screaming out to her son because he was now in a position on his back, almost pinned again. And all of a sudden, the mother's screaming, say your power word, say your power word. And automatically, he reversed his opponent and he pinned him. And how do I know this? Because it was in the newspaper. Right. The reporter said, I don't know what happened. He wasn't supposed to win. He's always getting pinned, but he won at 4 minutes and 22 seconds. But I know why, because I taught him this mental recall. And it's so powerful that you better watch out once you learn it, because otherwise you wouldn't believe it if you didn't use it. So at any rate, he did win that championship. And of course, he went to the state championship and he placed there. And he was so happy. Even though he had a knee injury, I helped him with that as well in his mind, to say that knee was as strong as the other knee. Matter of fact, it was even stronger, right? Because the doctor, of course, gave him permission to wrestle with the knee injury.
Right. Oh my God, that's a beautiful story. So it shows to me also the power of remembering, isn't it?
Yes.
We just forget what we have been, what we have done, because I use that a lot as a reference, Christine. Yeah, that's interesting that you said that, because every time I'm going on a new journey or whatever it is, I always remember what I have done before that was so challenging, and I did it. So, so the body also remembers. The mind, it's almost like the mind reminds the body to follow that, that trail. It's just so interesting how we even talked off record for a moment, how we forget these things, and how a lot of times for some of us, we don't know the options we have, right? When it comes to ADHD,
Yes.
Another thing. So perhaps to get started with that is, talk to me about your own personal experience with ADHD. I know I have the chronological order here.
When I was a child, as I said, I had very high energy. Like at 3 years old, I actually climbed a telephone pole with my sister's direction, way up to the top. The only thing is she didn't tell me how to come down. So I was stuck up there, and a neighbor had to get me down with the ladder. But she also, one day when there was this skating race that we had decided we would have in our block in Queens, where I live. And everybody was going to be skating, but I was considered too young, so they left me out. But we had this skate box in our basement, hand-me-down skates, because there were 5 children in my family, and I was number 4. So there was always this skate box. So we went to the skate box, and my sister took them out, and she fit them to my shoes, and they were strapped on. And so we went outside where the starting line was. I remember standing there, and all these older children, like twice my size, they were waiting at the starting line. So I said to my sister, so tell me, how do I skate? Because I didn't know. I had never experienced it. So my sister showed me, well, you move your feet like this, and you move your arms, and you go forward. So I said, okay. And then somebody blew the whistle, and we took off. And I bypassed some of the older children on the street. And my father just had a rare day off that day. He was standing there and he said, "Look at her go." You know, he was impressed because I was only 3 years old. And so that was the beginning of using my energy wisely. So I knew what to do to how to win. And then I became a roller skating champion when I was 10 years old. And I actually coached myself because my dad, who was an athletic director, said, "There are no sports for girls in my program. It's only for boys." So one day I was in this playground, and the public playground, PS 104, in my hometown of Far Rockaway, and I saw this sign. It said, "There's this citywide roller skating competition, and girls can join," right? So I went into the place where they stored all the equipment, the knock hockey and all the games, and I said to the athletic director in the building, "Well, I want to sign up for this." And he didn't say, "Bring it home and tell your parents." So I just signed myself up right there and said, I'm doing this, right? And I got measured and at the handball court, you know, my height, and they told me I was a mite. That was the shortest people in that age group. And I said, "Mite, what's that?" You know, and I said, "No, I must be Mighty Mouse, because what's a mite?" You know. So at any rate, I trained myself physically. I saw myself go over the finish line. I imagine I had Pegasus wings on my heels to make me go faster, and all the techniques I use now with my clients, right? And I didn't know the names, but I just knew that could help me. So I went to the first race at that school, and I won. And I got my first new pair of roller skates, and they were shiny new. They're from the Globe Skate Company, and they had these red inserts on the wheels. And I said, "Oh my gosh, look!" And I brought them home and I put them on the kitchen table before we had dinner. And my mother said, "Where did you get those from?" She thought I took them from a store or something, you know. And I said, "I won them," and I was so proud. So then my father, he helped me to go to the competition in Queens for that championship, and I won the Queens championship as well.
Wow!
And for that, I had a jacket that said champion. It had roller skates with Pegasus wings on them, right? And so that was really cool. And I was so proud to wear that jacket to school. And then from there, I went on to the citywide championship in New York City at Central Park, and I placed there as well. So that was my first knowledge, self-knowledge, that maybe I could use this energy and win big in my life. And I continued that with more races and also with running races. And I had a pogo stick that I went, that was my means of transportation in my small coastal town, where I would go from place to place on my pogo stick and just stop at the stoplights, you know, while it was a red light, and then cross the street on my pogo stick. So that was, you know, jumping around literally, but very, very versatile with the pogo stick. So that was fine. And I started school when I was very young. I was just 5 years old. And I learned very quickly that when I was in school, although I was an A student, the teachers would say that to my mom, "Your daughter has ants in her pants." And that kind of put a damper on things, because we didn't have the schoolyard. We didn't have the opportunity for recess. And I would squirm in my seat, and it was like torture to the end of the school day, where I just I ran out of the school and ran home, you know, with my book bag, and so it was perceived as negative, although my parents thought it was very normal. But everybody in my family had high energy like that, including my parents. So they looked at it as normal childhood, and questioned, "Well, why are they saying something's wrong? She's an A student," right? So it turned into, as I got older, into more judgment by teachers who weren't knowledgeable to diagnose. They weren't psychologists, and perhaps this was a Catholic school. maybe they didn't have the best instruction, in education, or even to know back then that children learn in different ways.
Right.
I'm a visual and kinesthetic learner primarily. And so trying to sit still and listen, although I did listen, I would squirm and then I'd get in trouble for it. Like one time I got thrown down 2 flights of cement steps on the way to assembly because we had my teacher that day was ill, and she was a nun and she was in the convent. And so the teacher of the other 8th grade, she had to come in and take care of my class plus hers. So that equals about 100 students back then in those days, because our classes were very large in the Catholic school. Yeah. So she came into the classroom to announce this one day that our teacher was ill, and that she had to take us down to the assembly. Yeah. And while she was talking, she's standing there in her black habit with the big white bib, that the nuns wore in those days. Yeah. And I was sitting in the first row, first seat, and I had this habit, because I was very athletic, to roll up a piece of paper into a ball and then pretend I was playing basketball and throw the paper in the trash can nearby. So I was right near the door where the trash can was. Right. So while she was talking, I was listening. I was a very good listener, but I went like this with the paper and I threw it in the trash can, but it bounced off and it hit the bottom, the hem of her habit. And when she saw that, she went into a fit of rage that I was being disrespectful, throwing things at her. And she should have known better, because she had been my teacher the year before. This was when I was in the 8th grade. And I got like a 95 average that year. So I don't know where she got this feeling that I was disrespectful, except for what she was experiencing, which even at 12, because I was the youngest in my class, I was 12 years old, and a lightweight, in pounds, because I'm petite. And so from that, we had to go down to this assembly. And so the class was lined up, the boys on one side. Now there's 100 of us, right, lining up. We go down these cement steps that were in the buildings at that time. Yeah. And the boys were on the right side and the girls were on the left side. But she took me and she threw me down the stairs in the middle. I had no handrail. And it's a good thing I had balance, right? I had very good balance in my roller skating. And so I got halfway down that first flight of steps. That's great. And I stood up and she threw me down again. Wow. In rage. And so I came out whole. I never told my parents. You just didn't tell your parents those things. I was embarrassed in front of all the classmates, especially being the youngest in the class. Yeah. And then afterwards, she said I had to report to her classroom down the hall. And I did. And she used me as an example. And she took me and she threw me against the door in the classroom in front of the other students, and told the principal, who announced during the assembly, that I was so bad and disrespectful. So that was a very big trauma for me, as you can imagine. Yeah. And I never really talked about it. I didn't tell my parents. Now, looking back, my mother would have gone up to the school and said something, and she would have believed me. And the teacher never had the opportunity to talk to me. And I never had the opportunity to say, I'm sorry, I was just playing basketball in my imagination, and it was just a ball of paper. It wasn't like these days, students pull out guns, to shoot the teacher. And all it was I was distracted, but I did hear what she said, because I had that ability to listen no matter what I was doing. That's part, I believe, of my what they're calling the condition of ADHD, to be very much aware of what's going on around you. That's why you have challenges focusing in the classroom. So at any rate, that happened. And then there were other things. As I went through my life in high school, I got punished for things. When I was in the first year of high school, we had religion class every day. This is a Catholic high school. And we finished this one chapter of this very thick catechism that we had to study all year, and we went to class every day for the catechism. So the nun said, okay, we finished this chapter on so-and-so, and does anybody have any questions? And this is an all-girls school.
Yeah.
And so I raised my hand, and I said, yes, I have a question. So I asked this question, and I was just curious. I said, well, my question is, if God is omnipotent, which means all-powerful and all-knowing, how come he can't make a boulder so big he can't move it, right? So the teacher didn't know how to answer. So what she said, she told me to sit down, because if the Pope heard me say that, I would be excommunicated from the Catholic Church. Wow. So I was petrified. So I sat down. Do you think I ever asked another question in religious class again? No. So here from a 13-year-old. So I went home. I didn't tell my mother, because what would happen if the word got out to Rome, and the Pope found out. And here, my poor mother, she worked as a waitress and spent her tips on sending me to this Catholic school. And I just couldn't tell my mother that I did such a horrible thing. So that was because I was curious and outspoken, and I would ask questions. And that's all part of what they're saying the syndrome is, that you speak out of turn. But she did ask the class, so what do you think? And I asked her this question, which was very profound for a 13-year-old. Yes. And it was studied by all the great religious philosophers, like St. Augustine, and all the, very intelligent people ask questions like that. So at any rate, those are two examples, and there are many more of what happened to me simply because I spoke. I spoke when the teacher said not to, or I went into the cloakroom on the exit, through the exit door, and I got spanked in front of my classmates and things like that. Yeah. So you take it forward. And when I was writing the speaking points for us, I realized, oh my gosh, I haven't spoken about this. That's why I put this in my book in chapter 8. Right. I had never thought about it until then. And of course, my mother never knew that I got thrown down the stairs, before she died, because I never told her. Yeah. So the idea is that you carry this trauma with you, and many people, many adults these days have that trauma and that stigma. And I'm saying, wait a minute here, it's just a way of knowing, and also a way that you can set yourself in the world, because we're all born as individual human beings, and we all have to fit ourselves into the world, and we're not all the same, and we're not all, 50 students in the classroom, we're individuals. And all the patients in the hospital, they're persons. They're not just patients, yes. Called by their diagnosis.
Yes, and yes. Oh my God, Christine. Yeah, that's something when I read the speaking points at that specific part, I highlighted exactly that. It kind of touched me profoundly too. And I think it has something to do with safety. Like I was wondering, why did she tell somebody about this thing? So you didn't feel safe in a way, wasn't it? Because that's what happens to a lot of children. We don't, and all humans in general, we don't feel safe to speak the truth.
We don't feel safe because in those days, especially when you're in the Catholic school and there's such a thing as sin and you have to obey your parents, you learn that from an early age. I mean, I knew the word omnipotent when I was in the first grade. That's a pretty advanced word. In the Holy Spirit and things we used to call the Holy Ghost, back then. So there was images of Halloween, with that. Yeah. So the whole idea is that you don't want to talk about how bad you were, and it was all about, you go to church and it was about sin and how you go to hell, the fire and brimstone. So no, it was common, people had those experiences with corporal punishment, not just in the Catholic schools, but in school in general. And people never talked about it because you feel bad. You feel like something's wrong. And these days, you might even think that you have a disease in your brain called ADHD that you can't even ever correct. and you're going to have it for the rest of your life, and you're always going to be bad and get in trouble. And some kids think that way these days.
How sad. So the foundation for that, it's a belief system, isn't it? Like a limiting belief system, actually illusory belief. I noticed that we have a lot of those. And is that something that I know with your work, you tap a lot into the mind's power. Is that something that you also speak about a lot with your clients too, Christine? I'm just wondering about what to believe in and how to always question our own minds too, not just use the power of the mind to achieve and all that, which is wonderful, but also question our own minds.
That's right. To use it wisely, because it is so powerful, especially when you're talking about teenagers who have amazing brains and a resource that we are not using, nor are we using these people who have high energy. Imagine if they were able to transform the energy and do great things in their lives and believe it when they're children and also when they're adults, rather than feeling terrible about themselves because they think in a different way. So they call it a nicer name these days, neurodiversity, right? So you can accept that better, but it still relates to the fact that you're different, and it's just a different way of knowing, and that's natural to you. Why would you think as a child that there's anything wrong with that and attach a disease to it? Because children don't know except through their own perception. It's like my sister, one time when we were young children, we had testing in the Catholic school for our eyesight, and the nurse in the school would bring the eye chart into the classroom. And so you'd sit in the seat waiting, and then you get online to read the chart, the cell chart. And so my oldest sister, would memorize the chart while she was waiting. And then she'd get online, and she always had perfect vision because she had a good memory. Yeah. But one time they decided, and I remember this, they decided to test them in the nurse's office, and you had to wait outside before you went in to take the test. And there was the distance away from the chart. And my mother got a note home. It said that my sister was like legally blind. She had amblyopia, but my mother never knew it. And so my mother was so surprised because she always got good reports. And she said to my sister, Joan, why didn't you tell me you couldn't see? So what do you think my sister said? She was probably like 10 years old. What do you think she said? She said, well, how am I supposed to know that other people don't see like me? Right? She thought it was normal. And because how would you know? Because our eyesight is something you have to learn. It's one of the senses that you have to learn. And we all learn it in different ways. So even today, years later, she still has challenges with amblyopia and other challenges with her eyes. But I have to look back and use that as an example, because how many times did we think, like when I was 13 and asked that question, that other people were asking the question, but I didn't know they were philosophers. They weren't 13-year-olds, and that they didn't get in trouble for it. Or maybe they did. Maybe they got their heads cut off for saying what they thought. Who knows, right?
Yeah, some of them did. And maybe that's maybe that's why the fear comes from too. This we inherit this ancient fear from the past that we are not even aware of, ancestry.
Yes, and that's to protect us from the environment. We always talk about how the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary axis, works. It's from the original humans as we in our evolution to protect us, so that if there was something that could endanger us, we had the choice to either flee or to stay and fight. Right. But that was maybe in a cave, right? Way back during our evolution, not when you're at school or in a wrestling match or you're at work and you're all tense and you don't know what to do. So we still have that evolutionary brain that responds that way for protection. But now we should know what to do to help ourselves and not fear and feel safe, especially with the teacher you trust. or especially with,
Yes.
a parent or a guardian or a coach that if you can't say how you feel, then
Right.
it could be a trauma to you, and you don't even know that what you're saying or doing is affecting this child, and maybe forever, because you never worked through the trauma of it. Fortunately, I did, and I learned from it, and I help other students.
Right.
They come to me. I don't work with ADHD or people who have this diagnosis. Many of them do have it when they come to me, but they want to achieve success in something. They want to win a wrestling match, or they want to, do well on the SATs. And so they come to me with this challenge, and I show them how to focus in these simple techniques, focusing techniques, and they do well, pulling themselves back into focus, knowing what to do. But the idea is that you can use the same things if you don't have a challenge. You can hit a home run just like anybody who doesn't have a challenge, and that's been proven on the baseball field.
Right.
I just watched the game last night, the All-Stars game, and watched them being at bat. And many of them might be on Adderall, because that's something that they think they need to win. But then there are baseball players, because there's a high rate of athletes on Adderall for that reason. And I'm thinking, well, after they learned all these great techniques to hit the ball or to be a champion, then why aren't they using them to focus? Because they can do it during a game, obviously, see the ball, hit the ball, or raise their hand at the end of a championship wrestling match, right? So these are great skills that you can learn in sports. Why? Because you have to focus. You know that from your experience as a trainer. You're in timed events on a wrestling mat or a baseball game. It's the last inning, or a football. You have to be able to score a takedown like that. It's a timed event, and it requires focus. And you can't be at bat and think that you're in left field out there, mentally, and actually you're probably going to strike out, right? But that's a good way to learn focusing through sports. When you think of it, every exam you took in school was a timed event. Children, you have 15 minutes to complete this spelling test, or the SAT has a time frame, and you have to complete it within that time. You can't say, "Can I have extra time, teacher?" Or can I refocus in this wrestling match that's 7 minutes long? No way, right? So that's a great way to learn. And if you can learn in a sport or playing the piano or some activity, then you can learn it in your life and use it wisely.
Yes, Christine, I know. So it feels to me like we are almost like, I don't know if I can use that word, lazy, in order to use our own natural resources, and we are kind of running towards something that's easy, that's available, that can give us what we.
Well, I think that's a cop out. I do, and because it may be that you're a child and you don't know there's something else. Like I knew when I was 10, right, with the skating race. It may be that you were never taught. It may be that your parents had challenges with focus. Notice how I'm using the word challenges with focus rather than some kind of disease or disorder. So you have this challenge, and your parents are models for you. So if they had challenges as a child, then you might have the same, not just through your genes, but through the nurturing of you. So my point is that we can learn these skill sets at an early age so that you'll have them and you'll know what to do. And they're portable skills from one place to the other. So you grow up with these if they're introduced to you, or if you just have the talent to develop them like I did. But I think children are much more inventive and creative than we give them credit for. No, you're not always going to win, but you're going to learn what to do to fix it. Like recently, I was working with a wrestler just the other night, and he felt bad about this match that he lost because he didn't position himself well, and he thought he was going to win. He said, I got a little cocky and he got out of position. He got too high. A term wrestlers use. I was too high. In other words, not close enough to his opponent's body. And then he got reversed and pinned. And so he's feeling really bad about this. So we talked about, okay, so what can you do to score in other ways, right? So he named like 5 things, you know, I could do this, I could do, okay, so here's your job this week. Go to practice and just take one of those and mentally rehearse it and then go and use it in practice and see how you do. Then we'll put it on the feedback loop and we'll work on it because he wants to use these skills coming up in the next wrestling season because he's going into high school and he'll need to have higher level skills there because, and it's very intimidating for ninth graders to be on a wrestling team when some of the people on the team are 18 and 19 years old. They're seniors. And here you are, you know, a freshman. And even though you've been wrestling since you're 5 years old, it's a whole different wrestling match, right? So you have to imagine that you're there and you're doing these things in your mind's eye, and then you actually go to practice, put it on the feedback loop to see what you can do to improve. It's a great opportunity. So he looked at me to say, that's interesting, you know, that he just didn't think about it because he was feeling so terrible about being too high, and he didn't think about what he could do to fix it, right? So it never happens again. If you want to score, you can use all these other ways. You don't have to just use one technique because they're all ready to go in your mind's eye, in the subconscious mind, ready from your toolbox to release. And I always say that you have an imaginary pocket in the back of your wrestling singlet, and you can just take it and whip it out from there and use it and score, and as your element of surprise.
Right, and that's the power of tools. They're having so many tools, being aware of them, and having them. I know you have also hypnosis. That's something else that you do, which I have tested. I have I love testing things, and I see the power of that. It's amazing how it can give you the solution of a problem that you never thought about it. It just kind of comes out.
Exactly. It's
amazing.
Very powerful and it's very natural. And it's also, I call it getting in the zone, you know, especially when relating to sports or performances, like when you're a musician or a singer or, you know, performing in live on Broadway like that.
Yeah, that's, I can only imagine. Well, I have heard that they use those performers and most, athletes, professional athletes, they all use these techniques.
Yes,
meditation.
Olympians know this. How do you think they get to be Olympians and win gold medals? Matter of fact, I was giving a workshop years ago when I was first starting out. It was in Pennsylvania. It was given at a hotel, and they had the wrestling mat right there on the floor in one of the rooms where somebody might have a wedding, right? And next door was the kitchen, so you could hear the clanking of the dishes while I was talking, right? So I'm out there on the actual wrestling mat, and I come into the room, and I feel a little intimidated because I'm the only female there, and they're asking me questions. These coaches, high school coaches, saying, "Well, are you here to help us? Why are you here?" Being the only woman. Well, I'm a nurse, and I'm here to help with peak performance. And they said, "Well, we're not injured. Why? You know, we don't understand why you came here." So I had a task, right, to show that I knew what I was talking about. Well, anyway, I was speaking to them, and they weren't listening, and they were saying hypnosis. It's like they never heard of it. So anyway, in a very low voice, and I have it recorded, the Olympic champion who was there co-presenting with me, his name was Kurt Angle, he looked at these coaches and he said, "You better listen to this lady because that's what I used to win the Olympic gold." And then they shut up, right? And they started to listen to me. Oh, that's great what you say, you know. But previously, they thought I was inexperienced. No, I never wrestled before. That is true. But then again, women weren't even allowed to participate in the Olympics until I think it was 2004. And this is prior to that I gave this presentation. So it's quite interesting. and we talked there about focus and what you can do. And that was really my preliminary mindful toughness skill sets that I was teaching, that I developed more since then, to teach to my clients. But that's an example, and it doesn't matter. Nobody asks you, do you have ADHD when before you go on the mat, or autism, or there's one wrestler who's very famous. He was born without legs. He had no legs, literally. And he's a national champion, very famous. And so he was told when he was a child that he couldn't wrestle, because how do you take somebody down if you don't have legs, right? Yeah. And how does somebody take you down if you don't have legs? Because that's one of the ways you do it. So that's a very famous wrestler who I love to watch when he was wrestling. Now he's a coach and very wonderful. They made a movie about his life recently that was very interesting. So, but at any rate, who's to say that you can't, and unless you say you can't, unless I couldn't. How could I wrestle? Because I don't have legs.
Right. I so admire you. I have said that before. For bringing this message forward, just always. And I know you've been doing so much work around this, getting this message out, because it is, it's not just empowering, but it's necessary, Christine.
Yes.
Right. We have lost touch with our own natural resources. And we are just reaching out to what is out there that can help me. And then we are going out of the way with medications and all that, and taking of course. You mentioned some people that I did know, some authors, that they also give some suggestions, some solutions here that you probably have mentioned already. Oh, yes. Some interesting ones. Find Your Calm. I think it was Tom Hartman's. The book.
Tom Hartman. Yes.
So it says, Finding Your Calm, Power Center. Heal your wounds, reconstruct the past, shed fears and phobias, reorganize timelines, and turn the strength of ADHD hunters into assets. Was him that talked about the hunters that the
Yes, well, he is the one, and it's very fascinating. He wrote a number of books, but he focused on evolution as the basis for having the condition I'm calling ADHD. Notice I'm not calling it a diagnosis, because we have challenges with diagnoses from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. It's not just for this health condition, but for people with schizophrenia, etc. We spoke about that before. But this man, he has a very original way to look at it. So he believes that the people who have these challenges back in the evolution of I'll say humankind, but they're not Homo sapiens, they're Neanderthals, right? We're learning so much more about Neanderthals within research. I know even at the Museum of Natural History, but researchers are coming up with how intelligent they were and how creative they were. So he says that where we evolved from being Neanderthals, and some people have the genes. Now, I got my DNA testing done with 23andMe, and I found out that I have a high percentage of Neanderthal DNA. And so he's saying that you had lots of energy, you lived in this world, and you were hunters, and everything was geared towards that, going out to hunt, to get food and to survive. But then there were the other people as we developed, and they agrarian society, where we started to have farming, and those are the gatherers, that they had the patience to sit there and to watch their crops grow, right? And so he says we're all like hunters and gatherers. The hunters may be the police officer who doesn't like to have a desk job, right? And or somebody who decides that they want to change their job because they're not happy being in a place where they're confined all day long. I had challenges with that as a young nurse. I did
Right.
work in hospitals at first. I was the manager of a 38-bed medical surgical unit when I was 22, and I used to come out of work in these long hours and think, I got to get out of this place, because I couldn't stand being confined. And so
Right.
many of us feel that way. A lot
Yeah.
of us during COVID, right?
Oh,
So,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
I decided that wasn't the best job for me. Later on, I became a visiting nurse and I went out into the field and I loved it, going to people's homes and talking to
Yeah.
them and having more time to discuss things with them and teaching them what they needed to know, even how to give an insulin injection, but also about their lives in the community, what their challenges were, the biopsychosocial aspects of their lives that I was
Right.
interested in beyond the medical model. So
Yeah.
that was me, and looking back, that's why I took that job when I got my bachelor's degree, and I studied community health nursing in school.
Right. You see how education really helps, right, Christine, to
Hmm.
know
Hmm.
the backstory,
Hmm.
the evolution of something.
Hmm.
So we are not
Yeah.
just trapped in judgment or suffering,
Hmm.
unnecessary
Hmm.
suffering. Really.
Hmm.
How wonderful. I love that you, I mean, you're just so curious about everything and you research everything, you read everything, and then you just come up with these very fascinating kind of, um, uh, what do you call them? Almost like connections, relationships, and you just kind of
Yes.
put it
Hmm.
together in a very rational and fun. I love listening to you on the stories too. How I mean, they sometimes they're heartbreaking, I have to say,
Hmm. Hmm.
but also fun because they're teaching us. So I feel like it's almost like listening to an indigenous elder with so much
Hmm.
wisdom to just kind
Hmm.
of pour what they
Hmm.
love to the
Hmm.
young. That's how I feel. It's really, yeah, it's kind of coming to me as a message. The work
Hmm.
that you're doing is like a beautiful, beautiful, wise elder, like indigenous, powerful woman. So, but this is because probably because I'm in Hawaii. That's coming up for me a lot too. The
Hmm.
ancestry of
Hmm.
wisdom. So let's see, almost at the end. I want to mention also, you mentioned somebody else, Thomas Armstrong.
Yes,
Right, the
yes,
book.
and he's
Yeah,
fascinating. He was a psychologist, and he wrote a book, 100, and gave us 101 ways that you could use
right.
ADHD, to be positive. And
Yes,
he spoke about the stigma of that, and how we set up kids with this diagnosis. And I know sometimes they're in special classes and they don't get the same attention that other students get, and
right,
they may be uh, really not learning positive things about themselves because of
right,
society. and
right.
and so he encourages um, children and parents to teach them how to think, having these qualities. As I said, I had
Yeah,
the qualities of high energy, but how we waste it, and not just for those who have focusing challenges, but for teenagers. Why are
yes,
they all um, feeling depressed and anxious and have a high level of suicide when they have these great, amazing brains that anybody can learn, whether you have the focusing issue or not, um,
right.
to expand your brain with the linkages when you're a teenager from the age of about 12 to 30, because the
Yeah,
human brain doesn't develop fully till we're 25. And
right.
all this energy that's wasted. Now, if you were on a desert and you just ran out of gasoline and you left the town, and the next town isn't coming, for 100 miles, so you walk 20 miles back to the gas station where you should have gotten the gas to begin with, and
Yeah,
now you have to carry this back to your car.
yeah.
Would you take those gallons in a container and just pour it haphazardly into your tank, or would you value every single drop? Right?
Mm,
So everybody
wow.
says, "Oh no, I would value the gasoline," but we don't value our own energy. And
Mm,
sometimes we lose it as we get older. You know,
Yeah.
I spoke about it in a previous podcast, how I went
Yeah.
into a nursing home recently, a memory care facility, and all the people were sitting there in the wheelchairs and, talking to themselves. And this one lady grabbed me literally and said,
Yeah.
"Get me out of here! Get me out! I'll give you $1,000." You know, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, why don't we value our energy when we're young, and and use the resources? So I say that we should learn what to do and not put a stigma on this for those who think differently, and show them as Tom Hartman and also this man Thomas Armstrong says, we should teach them how to think and how to relate, because they're teenagers in and of themselves, regardless of their status and focusing, they have the development of the right side of the brain and the amygdala and the emotion, but then they'll have the executive functioning developing until many years later, sometimes a 10 to 15-year lag between the right brain and the left brain. So that's what causes all the risk-taking behavior. And that's true of people who had this condition where they might not have the executive functioning for different reasons. But whatever the reason, it still ends up in the same place, that you're having challenges at your job, at school, or something else. But put you on the baseball field, you might hit a grand slam, because you can focus for that, see the ball, hit the ball.
Right. He said, I just highlighted something about this. So Thomas Armstrong, he's a psychologist. He wrote the book, The Myth of the ADHD Child.
Mm-hmm.
So the solutions, he said, I have here, emphasis on diversity, one, holding a positive image of children, two, celebrating successes, of course, building resilience, sharing stress management techniques, and then enhancing children's self-esteem, another one. But he wrote a book with 101 ways. That's wonderful. I never heard about this book. That's so amazing. And let me see. There, and I have my notes here. Are there any other? Oh yeah, you talked about. There was an example that you gave about the how you assisted the 17-year-old wrestler to win. Did you talk about that already, Lawrence? I think you didn't mention him, did you, Christine?
We were talking about it previously.
Earlier?
Yes.
Oh, his name is Lawrence. Okay.
Yes. So he was 17 years old, and he had the diagnosis of ADHD for many years, and he was on medication. I think it was Ritalin. And he decided when he got into his when he became 17, he didn't want to take the medication anymore. He didn't like the way it made him feel.
Right.
So he was in a new school, and he had a coach who didn't particularly understand him, because he would jump around the wrestling mat, not listen to any direction. And the coach called me and said, "Can you help him? He's like a basket case," he called him. And he also said that it would be a miracle if I could help him. So at any rate, he was willing to work with me. I worked with him just for 3 hours. And I taught him the mindful toughness techniques and how to focus, what to do, to touch your headgear, soak the fingers, the things I teach everybody. But the one thing that was different is that I developed this system. It was really a white paper plate that I got at the supermarket, and I put numbers on it from 1 to 10. And we decided that the focus, where the focus should be for a match, was at 5. And he could give me a high five if he got in that zone. Mm-hmm. And so in his mind's eye, he could change the dial. Sometimes he'll need more energy, sometimes less, but he could focus. So I showed him these things, breathing easy, mental rehearsal to improve his skills. And he had never won a tournament except for a district tournament, which is a lower level than a national tournament. Yeah. So at any rate, we practiced, and he, as it turns out, he won the national championship, which is huge.
Wow.
The National Prep Championship. And his parents were so excited because they didn't know what to do, and the coach was happy as well because he had another person who won the championship that year. But if you can focus during a wrestling match and win, and this very intense competition, as you can imagine, if you can focus as long as you want on anything you want in that situation with all the pressure, then you can focus at other times, because these are portable skills. Now take them and try them in the classroom, right?
Yes.
Take them and try them to get a date to the prom, right? I've done that too with teenagers who want to desperately go to the prom, but they're afraid to ask the girl for the date, right? So I help them. Oh, you could do that and win wrestling championships, so it's quite amazing. And they're so happy. Or first to pass their driver's test the first time around with the same techniques, things that are important to teenagers.
Right. I'm so glad, for lack of a better word. Actually, this is something that it resonates with my heart, because you're helping young people. That's the future of humanity, isn't it? That they are the seeds. We need them to be wise. We need them to tap into their natural resources again, and stop relying on the outside to.
Yes, and nobody tells them what to do. Nobody teaches them. They're so happy to learn them. They say, why didn't anybody teach me about mind power before? It makes life much easier, to know how to win. Or if you don't win, well, what can you do the next time around to make it better? And it just gives them tools to use at the same time, especially with teenagers when their brain is developing. And this goes for young adults as well, and Gen Zs, because you're in college and you need to use the power of your mind and to start off your work after you graduate and have your brain fully developed. Because we know that some people could be 80 and they still don't have developed brains as far as using the power of the mind.
Yes. And as you said, I remember you saying that to me long ago when we met, I think, by using both sides of the brain, like being more balanced in that sense. And I remember kind of almost like rejecting the idea initially, because I wanted to use more of the right brain and be more Yeah, that's something that I learned from you. So I started practicing that myself.
Good.
So we're almost at the end, Christine. What final thoughts do you have on ADHD? What is your final message, per se?
Well, I think that we're at a crossroads, as I wrote in my speaking points, because there is still controversy about how ADHD is diagnosed from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and also that the things that researchers told people way back when they were developing these programs and giving drugs, and the reason for giving drugs, that they just were bad science, pseudoscience, and they were not true. Like here, you take this drug that it could be addictive, like Adderall.
Right.
And you don't have any behavioral conditioning, and that's been proven to be wrong, because they're going back to the idea, like Marilyn Wedge that you mentioned, and Dr. Lawrence Diller, who says that it's a natural condition, it's childhood, and also they say that we should have the environment. There was a big study and a big article recently written by Paul Tuff, who's a journalist, and he was talking about this, that taking Adderall isn't the same thing as giving your child aspirin. When aspirin could be dangerous at times because of Ray's syndrome, but it's not the same thing as giving your child who has type 1 diabetes insulin. It's not a deficit in the sense that you have an Adderall deficit. You don't, you just think a different way. And it's been proven that it may affect you positively in one way, but it doesn't help you to learn. And it doesn't last for very long. So they're looking at these things again as they were in the 1990s during the decade of the brain. The brain is the cause of everything and not the nurturing. So now they're looking towards the environment. And we do have some schools, as I mentioned, popping up, the UDL, which is the Universal Design of Learning schools, where they put children who have the diagnosis ADHD and other students together in the same classroom. And they all work independently, even evaluating themselves and setting their lesson plans, and they do it together. So it's not this separation and this stigma. So we're moving in that direction, but there's still a lot of learning. And of course, people don't want to let go of their old habits. And they might want to give the Adderall patch to their 6-year-old as he goes out the door to first grade. And that's a Schedule 2 psychologically addictive drug that the child's absorbing rather than learning what to do to fit themselves in and have some fun with it as well, because diversity is the big topic these days, right? And ethnic diversity, religious freedom, and all this, that we're all different and we have different perceptions, but we are family of humanity, and we all have to work together, and especially for those who care for children, teachers, coaches, parents, grandparents, anybody who has an interest in taking care of children, to help them to be the best they were born to be and to reach their potential. And that's my goal with my work, to show people there's something you can do to help yourself. And it doesn't depend on medication. Of course, I'm not against medication for those who need it, but I see it as a temporary thing. You should always have behavioral conditioning, like the work that I do, along with it, even if it's prescribed by a doctor. So that's my position, and I've been successful, not just with other people, but with myself. So I have the experience to back it up, and I know what I'm talking about. I don't think people can breach this subject if they don't experience it themselves, which, as I did as a little kid, climbing the telephone pole.
I know. That's funny. Yeah, that's cute, and that's funny at the same time. Yes, that's it, Kristen. Thank you so much for saying. I mean, thank you for everything, for your beautiful presence. Again,
Yes.
It's a gift to humanity. What your message is, what your wisdom is bringing and is upholding. So, and that's very close to my heart. And that's why every time we meet, my heart opens even wider. There's something about. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So I want to mention your websites. So you have two websites, drchristinesilverstein.com and idealperformance.net. Both of them will be on the podcast notes, clickable, so it's easier.
Yes.
And you also are on Amazon, audiobook. Oh, talk to me. Yeah, maybe this very end. Where else to find you? I know you're on LinkedIn, Facebook.
Yes, well, drchristinesilverstein.com is my book website. So it has a lot of information about my book, Wrestling Through Adversity. And the other website is for my clinical work and how I work. So both are useful. But also, I'd like to mention that in April, I won an award for my book. And it's very dear to my heart because it's called the Hustle and Heart Gold Book Award for Social Impact. And oh my goodness, when I saw that, I was thrilled, because that's the reason I wrote my book, to have a social impact. So I'm very proud of that, that I stuck with it and wrestled through the adversity to get where I am. And especially now that I'm nearing the publication of my book in Arabic, which was also a very big challenge.
Yes. Oh my God, Christine.
And you can reach me also on Facebook. I'm on Facebook. I write a weekly blog, a weekly newsletter on LinkedIn. And then also I have some things on Instagram, but I'm expanding. So a lot of these topics, like the amazing teen brain, you can find on my blog on both websites.
Wonderful. I'll have them here on the podcast notes. Thank you so much again for this communion of wisdom. That's what I call it. I'm a wisdom lover. So thank you so much again, Christine.
You're welcome. And I wish you success in your new venture in Hawaii.
Thank you. We'll talk soon off record. For now, I'll end this conversation for the record. Thank you so much again. Bye for now.
You're welcome.
That was Dr. Christine Silverstein, sharing another powerful story and practical tools to help young people build resilience and truly win from within. If today's episode resonated with you, please subscribe and share it with a parent, coach, or caring adult in your life who needs to hear this message. To learn more about Dr. Silverstein's work and to dive deeper into the topics discussed, visit her website, idealperformance.net. Thank you for listening to Wrestling Through Adversity with Dr. Christine Silverstein and interviewer Valeria Koopman, host of the Fit for Joy podcast. We'll be back next time with more insights on developing mindful toughness.